Augsti godātais valsts prezidenta padomnieks Lappuķe.
Right Honorable Presidential Advisor, Mr. Lappuķe. Right Honorable Minister of Justice, Mr. Bordāns. Right Honorable Director of the National Library of Latvia, Mr. Vilks. Dear Sprudžs family, dear relatives, friends, colleagues, everyone attending and everyone listening remotely. My name is Laume Remese. I'm one of those who created this exhibition and I will lead this opening event tonight. Welcome to the opening of the Camber exhibition, Not to Get Lost Between Continents, Sprudžs Family. The exhibition is devoted to the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the library scientist and international law specialist Adolfs Sprudzs. The Sprudžs are a strong family coming from Latgale, whose representatives have left lasting traces in the context of historical events both in Latvia and in the world by working in different areas. The remarkable anniversary of Adolfs Sprudžs became the reason for creating the exhibition to learn and tell anew about the significant contribution of the Sprudžs family to Latvian society. The exhibition follows the traces of Sprudžs brothers, areas of activities of Adolfs, Aleksandrs and Jānis, devoting special attention to Adolfs Sprudžs, whose contribution to science, professional activity, preservation of Latvia's ethnic statehood and restoration of independence has been awarded several times with the highest state awards in Latvia and the United States. At the exhibition you can view publications by Adolfs Sprudžs, the documents preserved by the family, photographs, as well memorabilia and paintings by brother Jānis Sprūdžs. The exhibition uses the materials from collections of the National Library of Latvia and the Museum of Francis Trasuns, Kolnasāta. First, I will give the floor to the presidential advisor, Rolands Lappuķe.
Labdien visiem klātesošajiem un tālāk.
Good afternoon to all those present and those beyond. When I asked the president if he wanted me to say some words about Adolfs Sprudžs, he called me 5 minutes later and practically dictated what to say. Apparently, he had a special bond with Adolfs Sprudžs, and his specialty indicated why. First, he told me to say that he thought extremely highly of Adolfs Sprudžs as a person both professionally and as a member of Latvian society. He mentioned a special publication he used when he was working on historical matters. The publication was published by Adolfs Sprudžs himself. It was a 1954 report on the Baltic states to the United States of America by Kerstens. He highlighted how important the document was for scientific research. Second, he wanted to point out Adolfs Sprudžs' international work, namely, within the framework of the Library Federation and his work as the president of the Librarians of International Law. I think that there are only a few Latvians that have shown the skills necessary to obtain such high evaluations and hold such high positions. He also mentioned something I knew less about, the newsletter on library science created and published by Adolfs Sprudžs. But in the end, he wanted to highlight that Adolfs Sprudžs had always been a patriotic worker of Latvian society. He told me to say something on my own behalf too. Uģis, I didn't know your father, but judging by you, I can say that as a public worker, he was also a good teacher. Because Uģis, I know what you have achieved, not only in Latvia, but professionally too. I think that not everyone from the exiled society has been able to achieve so much professionally, but also to remain active in Latvian society and pass on this legacy to their children. Not everyone has this ability. Finally, Egils Levits wanted to mention one fact. I haven't checked the date, but I think it was in 1994 when the Minister of Justice at that time visited Chicago, where Egils Levits lectured. He visited you at your home and watched TV when in Moscow the attempted coup against Yeltsin took place and the parliament was set on fire. I think that pointed out warm feelings. With all my heart, of course, on behalf of the President, I want to congratulate the family and Uģis for organizing this event. I think that exiled people, those who grew up in exile and know all the hard work, didn't find it easy to drive to the Latvian community for 2 hours and to take their children to school on Saturday mornings. That itself is a huge merit, and it was not a sacrifice, because there was simply no choice. It was because they wanted to do it. I think that the contribution to Latvian culture and history is significant enough. I wish you the best of luck.
Paldies.
The floor is given to the Minister of Justice, Jānis Bordāns. Good afternoon. Dear Mr. Sprudžs, dear employees of the National Library of Latvia, the team. I want to thank you all. Everyone has certainly worked hard to deepen the understanding of our nation and history. What I mean with that is that I'm here to personify, above all, the Latvian government. The Latvian government is more and more aware of the need to express and show honor and respect to those people who have worked tirelessly all their lives for the good of Latvia and the Latvian people. In any circumstances, when Latvia has existed de facto or only de jure, and whether it has been Latvia here, on Latvian soil, or whether it has been in another part of the world, each of outstanding Latvians and each of the ordinary Latvians has been Latvia. But I'm especially honored that it has come at a time when I can talk to you both as a lawyer and as a representative of the government, and especially as a representative of justice, as well as a simple lover of books and a visitor to various libraries. And we can thank for all of that our hero of the day, Adolfs Sprudžs.
Adolfs Sprūdžs. Vēl, manuprāt, ļoti svarīgi ir tas, ka mums ir iespēja.
In my opinion, it is very important that we have the possibility at times like this to be together with relatives, children, and the family of such people. Because it is the families who create such people, whose work we can enjoy and feel safer with what they have created and left for us. They did it not only for themselves, but also for the common good. And even more, these people who we must remember, commemorate and honor, and create memorials for, help us to understand the self-awareness and significance of our country and nation. I think that in recent years this has become more widespread. Many people remember such people from their industries that weren't talked about at big events. Probably, if any pupil was asked which politicians they know from then, 20 years ago, they would say Kārlis Ulmanis, Jānis Čakste, and then they would have to start to think, see, we are going further, step by step, and we talk about people we all need to know about, or at least within our professional framework. Last week, in the Ministry of Justice, we opened a room where lawyers, guests of the Ministry of Justice, and guests from abroad usually meet and visits take place. Previously, this room was called Room 250. Now it is called the Pēteris Juraševskis room. A lot of people didn't know Pēteris Juraševskis either, even the visiting historians said. We opened the page, looked at it, and found out that he used to be a Minister of Justice, just as Egils Levits was the first Minister of Justice of the restored country. And that's how we find out that the Latvian nation is even bigger and deeper, and how much Latvians have given to the world, to science, to culture, and overall, to the good, bright side of the world. That is what comes to my mind. Thank you those who organized this event and the exhibition. Let's hold such people as Adolfs Sprudžs in high esteem. When I see his name, my father comes to my mind, whose name also was Adolfs, and it was a rare name in Latvia back then. Thank you. The floor is given to the Director of the National Library of Latvia, Andris Vilks.
Sveicināti, mīļie klātesošie.
Greetings, dear guests. Today we celebrate the centenary of Adolfs Sprudžs, our colleague, our friend, and a very important figure of cultural and political history.
Ādolfs Sprūdža simtgadi un es gribētu
And I would like to say a few words about Adolfs Sprudžs and his family.
Un viņa ģimeni, jo mums ir ļoti sena.
As we have had a long and lasting cooperation and also a common further part after Adolfs passed away.
Kopīgs arī pēc Ādolfa aiziešanas viņa saulē.
I want to mention how it all started.
Sākās, tas bija 1900.
It was in 1989 when the Association of Latvian Librarians decided to renew their activities. And we published an invitation to cooperate with librarians both in Latvia and all over the world.
Bibliotekāriem gan Latvijā, gan visā pasaulē, un mums par lielu pārsteigumu.
And it came as a big surprise when we received 2 letters from abroad, from exile too.
Arī no ārvalstīm, no trimdas.
These letters came from Inese Auziņa from Loughborough University and Adolfs Sprudžs from the University of Chicago. They expressed their wish to join the association during the first meeting and to take part in the conference for the renewal of the Librarian Association. It was also significant from the point of view that the Library Association of Latvia resumed its activity, which had actually been forcibly stopped in 1940. That is how we get acquainted with Adolfs, and our friendship has lasted till this very day. The next fragment in the thread of memories relates to the IFLA conference, which we attended in 1989, when independence had not yet been restored.
IFLAS kongresā, un
And it was the first time a Latvian delegation took part in this Congress. We still were required to use USSR labels, which we transformed into Latvian labels. After which we were in a big trouble from the USSR delegation management of that time, but it was no problem for us. And one of the arguments why all the delegation changed the labels from the USSR to Latvian ones was because Adolfs and Jānis Sprūdžs joined us and that Congress. And I want to add that Jānīna, Adolf's wife, is, so to say, an integral part of this story. The couple had met in Belgium at the University of Leuven, and they both worked as librarians in Chicago all their lives. And because of this, such connection was very important for this family. That time, their daughter Rita also attended the IFLA Congress, and I have met her several times after that too. And after that, Adolfs and I have also attended various other IFLA Congresses. I should say that Adolfs was a very influential, very important person. I think that he is the most significant Latvian who has held key positions with leading duties. It was in the IFLA structures where he was the head of law libraries. And globally, he was one of the most significant people in the field of law libraries. I repeatedly visited Chicago, and on my first trip to Chicago, I also got acquainted with the Law School Library of the University of Chicago, managed by Adolfs. And besides everything else, another acquaintance was made. The building of the University of Chicago was designed by Eero Saarinen, a Finnish architect that Gunnars Birkerts, the architect of the National Library of Latvia, considered to be his teacher. So, when approaching this building, I sensed something familiar, to which Adolfs responded with a smile, telling me it was Saarinen's work. And that time in Chicago, I met Uģis Sprūdžs, who is present at this event. And so, a friendship and cooperation started with Adolf's son, Uģis, that lasts to this day, and I am still grateful for that. Another Chicago story is related with visiting and having a place to stay in the Sprūdžs family apartment. I remember when Adolfs told me that the bed I was sleeping in was very important, as both Ziedonis and the Kakars brothers had slept there, as well as many other celebrities. It was an approach that was characteristic of exiled Latvians, and it started even before Latvia tried to regain its independence. They have always been very hospitable, and during every trip they helped their compatriots save some money on hotels by offering a place to stay. And I am one of the Latvians that during the first years felt this hospitality, also in their home, enjoying the favors of the Sprūdžs family. The last time we met with the Sprūdžs family in Chicago was during the Song Festival of 2003. I think it was the first song festival of American and Canadian Latvians. Gunārs Birkarts also attended this festival, and that was when these gentlemen met. I still have some photos, as we had gone to give a presentation on a library project to Latvians in America. We have a beautiful photograph with Gunārs and Adolfs. Shortly before Adolfs passed away, we met in Munich at the Free Europe radio station, where we both were simultaneously, and we were interviewed by the radio. And so we had an enjoyable time in Munich too. It is important to mention that it was not only Adolf's family that was supportive. Further on, I will tell you about the support of the National Library of Latvia. One of the first of such steps was the creation of the so-called Adolfs Sprudžs Foundation. It is connected with the heritage of his brother, Zanders, and it included well-known resources and a collection of books. Adolfs Sprudžs was a very well-known cooperation specialist in Canada. Cooperation was his life story. The resources invested in this foundation from Adolfs Sprudžs were spent on buying books for the National Library of Latvia. These book donations and financial donations were very stable and constant, even when in 2003 Adolfs passed away, and in 2009 his wife Jānīna. Before that, the Support Association of the National Library of Latvia received even bigger donation on a regular basis. Sometimes there is a feeling that the National Library of Latvia is big and expensive, but I want to point out that over the years, when it wasn't possible to start the library's building process, this support by the Sprudžs family was very important and very significant, and that pushed the project to be carried out. All thanks to such people as the Sprudžs family, Adolfs and Jānīna. This has been very significant. And I also want to mention the beautiful moment when we, with family members of the Sprudžs family, visited Adolf's birthplace, Sakstagals, after he passed away. And by the Sprudžs home tree, mighty linden trees still grow. These trees were planted to honor Adolfs, Aleksandrs, and the youngest brother, Jānis, who stayed and lived in Latvia. It was a nice trip to the Museum of Sakstagals. The last memory I want to share is connected to events that took place not so long ago, in 2017. In that year, Gunārs Birkarts received the Architecture Award of the United States of America for the most successful project abroad. As Gunārs was quite ill already and soon after that passed away, I was requested to travel to Chicago and receive this award on behalf of Gunārs.
vietā uz Čikāgu un toreiz.
Back then, I, of course, used the opportunity to visit Uģis Sprūdžs family.
Uģis Sprūdžs ģimenē, un mēs arī bijām.
And we also visited the Chicago Latvian Library Association. That has just been renovated, and it was quite interesting. It was very important to meet in the Sprūdžs city, so to say, in the context of Gunārs Birkerts and the Architecture Award, and those were wonderful days, during which we remembered Adolfs as one of the most significant Latvian librarians, and also remembered Jānis. And I'm sure that other guests at this event will speak also about all his other merits connected with jurisprudence and law, history of law, with publication on the independence of Latvia, and many other topics, which Adolfs has a lot of publications and books on. Thank you.
Paldies!
The floor is given to Uģis Sprūdžs, the son of Adolfs Sprudžs.
Nu, labvakar. Tā.
Dear Councillor, Mr. Minister, Mr. Director, honourable guests, dear friends and relatives.
LNB draugi, godājumie viesi, mīļie draugi un radi.
Once upon a time, a father had 3 sons. Many Latvian folktales begin with such an introduction, and I will borrow it today. But only the introduction, not the continuation of the story, since it doesn't exactly match my topic. Well, let's begin. Once upon a time, a father, Ādolfs Sprūdžs, had 3 sons. What did Ādolfs look like? We can see this from his portrait on the wall in the conference room. He was born in 1882 in Maģuļi, Latgale, south of Varakļāni. At the age of 22 or 23, during the Russo-Japanese War, he landed in the army of the Tsar and served in the artillery. He returned home with a limp, but otherwise he was gifted and hard-working craftsman. After his military service, he married Veronika Runtovska from Sakstagals. Her portrait is also in the conference room next to Kārlis. Kārlis' brother Augusts had a grave monument workshop in Cēsis, and for a while Kārlis worked there as a stonemason. In 1914, Kārlis and Veronika had their first son Aleksandrs. Aleksandrs, or Alex, was my godfather. Already as a young man, Aleksandrs showed a passion and dedication to commercial and public organizations. At the age of 22, he earned the status of a certified co-op auditor and began traveling around Latvia's countryside, assisting and examining the activities of local cooperatives. 7 years later, in 1943, he was able to finish the University of Latvia's economics faculty. But there was a war going on, and he could not avoid getting drafted into the German armed forces. After the war, Alex traveled to Canada with his spouse, Dzidra. In the late 1950s and early 60s, the Canadian government was investing funds to boost economic growth in its northern territories. Inuit and Native American populated lands. Alex was recruited by the government and given the task of creating a cooperative network for those peoples. He was brilliant at it. He was, for example, the first employee of his department to prepare cooperative teaching materials in the Inuit language. The Inuit cooperatives founded with his assistance are still working today under the name Arctic Cooperatives Limited. Last year, this network of cooperatives reported revenue of 287 million Canadian dollars and employed 1,000 people. Over time, after a successful career, he was appointed to a senior position in the Canadian capital, Ottawa, and received several awards for his achievements. In his retirement years, he did research work advising cooperative organizations in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. In his later years, he also lectured in Latvia. Alex has a showcase in this exhibition. The National Library of Latvia also received a book donation from him containing literature on cooperative development and general economics. Kārlis and Veronika had their second son, Jānis or Janka, 6 years after Alex. At the time they lived in Sakstagals in Veronika's hometown. This was the Latgalian countryside, and as a young man of Latgale, Janka fell in love with horses. Trotters trained by him were reputed to be among the fastest in the county. They could get you to Rēzekne in 14 minutes. Janka also had deep and versatile artistic and musical talents. His grandfather, Juris, had married Māra of the Garanči family. Perhaps that is the source of the Sprudžs musicality. Then again, perhaps it was already innate among the Sprudžs. Janka, like his brothers, was sent by his parents to school in Riga. When the Second World War came, he returned to the countryside. He was protected from the draft into the Latvian Legion by a doctor's note. But at the end of the war, he and his family, wife Lydia and daughter Benita, remained on the other side of the front. So it happened that for many years he was separated from both of his brothers. After the war, authorities found a reason to send him to the Gulag, and from there he returned when amnesties were announced. As a former Zek, he didn't have all the same opportunities as others, but he turned to painting and as a self-taught artist created even prize-winning works. Today, his works are with family and at the Kolnasāta Museum in Sakstagals. We find Janka's presence in this exhibition in the paintings hanging in the conference room. The portraits of his father, Kārlis, and mother, Veronika, were painted by him. Alongside them is his self-portrait and the backyard scene from their Sakstagals home. Their youngest son, Adolfs, was born to Kārlis and Veronika 2 years after Janka, on September 19, 1922. My father would have celebrated his 100th birthday yesterday. Adolfs, like his brothers, attended schools in Riga, as did Alex. Dolf, or Adis, as he was sometimes called, studied and graduated from the business high school. Perhaps there he discovered his natural talent for languages. In the Riga Business High School, he learned English well enough to be able to work in England in the post-war years as an English teacher in the coal mines, where many workers were refugees without knowledge of English. Adolf was proficient in 4 languages at a professional level: Latvian, English, German, and French, and could also read and communicate in Russian. Unlike Alex, Adolfs was interested less in commerce than in law. At the time when Alex graduated from the university, Adolf began his studies in the law faculty. Unfortunately, the war and the draft disrupted his study plans, and they only resumed after the war at Tübingen University in southwest Germany. There were other Latvian students there, mainly in the fields of science and medicine. My father made close friends with them, and they formed a small, informal but close-knit group of friends called Rakte. Their choice of the name of the group was very deliberate and tells a lot about their understanding of history and their understanding of their fate and purpose in life. Does anyone remember what Rakte was? As we can read in the chronicles, at the end of the 13th century, Rakte was the last fortification in Livonia held by the local Semigalians during the Northern Crusades. After the death of King Names, however, the Crusaders attacked Rakte, burned down the area, and as a result forced the inhabitants of the castle to flee and go into exile in Lithuania. The Tübingen Rakte group felt a resemblance to the Semigalians. They too had been forced to leave their homeland. But I have a feeling that there was also a desire among them to defeat fate. Yes, they thought, we are like the Rakte folk of old, but we will do better. Though in exile, we will remain faithful to our nation for the rest of our lives. In this exhibition you can see Adolf's handwritten collection of Rakte songs. He was a great singer and recorded these songs in a careful handwritten script for himself and for the future. It was not meant for my father to complete his studies in Tübingen. Instead, this happened in Belgium, in the French language division of Louvain University. At the time, the Latvian Catholic bishop, Boļeslavs Sloskans, had received funding from the Vatican for scholarships to Latvian Catholic students in Belgium. Like the theologian and later poet Roberts Mūks, my father joined the group of Latvian students at Louvain. He was soon joined by Janina, whom my father had met earlier at Latvian youth events. They celebrated their wedding in 1951. During his Louvain phase, my father began to fulfill his ability to combine academic work with a deeply felt duty to serve Latvia. In one significant thesis, he discussed the annexation of the Baltic states by USSR from the point of view of international law. Shortly thereafter, this work came to America from Louvain and was used by a United States Congressional Committee seeking a deeper understanding of the Soviet Union's strategy and methods for seizing power, using as a starting point the case of the Baltic states. Adolf learned from this that it was necessary to repeatedly publicize the fate of the Baltic states in international forums and academic publications. 20 years later, he and his colleague Igor Kavas succeeded in republishing the report of this congressional committee by a well-known United States legal publishing house, and it was acquired by many law libraries for the use of international law researchers, such as, for example, President Egils Levits. A second similar achievement of Adolf was the publication in 1968 by an internationally renowned publishing company of a collection of academic articles given the Latin title Res Baltica, about Baltic affairs. For this book, my father mobilized a whole team of specialists from India to Sweden who reminded the world of the 15th anniversary of the announcement of Latvian independence, that the matter of the Baltic states has not yet been resolved. In the same year, the Association for the Advancement of Baltic Studies was founded in America, and among the founding members of the association were Rakte members, Adolfs and his close friend, the New Yorker Jānis.
Jānis Krēsliņš.
One important reason for my father's success was that he himself had become an internationally recognized specialist. While working at the University of Chicago's law school as the foreign law librarian and lecturer on foreign law, he prepared international law researchers and students, traveled overseas to promote cooperation between the University of Chicago and teaching institutions and librarian organizations around the world. He also managed to publish more than 20 books and several dozen academic publications. Adolfs was honored by his colleagues in the United States and Latvia. In 2001, the Latvian Academy of Sciences granted him an honorary doctorate. A year later, he received the Order of the 3 Stars of the State of Latvia. Adolfs had close links with Latvian librarians and the National Library of Latvia. Wherever possible, he supported the participation of Latvian librarians in international conferences, organized exchanges of books with libraries in the Baltic area, and donated both personal resources and his books to the National Library of Latvia collection. Aleksandrs, Inga, and Ādis each have left permanent traces in our memory, Latvian heritage, and society in general. We are grateful to the National Library of Latvia for this wonderful opportunity to remember and appreciate them once more. Thank you for your attention. We have received a greeting letter from the University of Chicago, supplementing the story told by the son Uģis Sprūdžs. The translation of the letter into Latvian will be read by the head of the Humanities and Social Sciences reading room, Inga Vovčenko.
Labdien, augsti godātais valsts prezidenta padomnieka kungs, tieslietu ministra kungs, Uģis Sprūdža kungs, ģimene, kolēģi, draugi. Rādi visi, kas klausās, mūs arī tiešsaistē.
September 15, 2022. Mr. Andris Vilks, Director of the National Library of Latvia. Dear Mr. Vilks, I write to congratulate the National Library of Latvia on the opening of the commemorative exhibit in honor of the Sprudžs family. We are immensely proud of Adolfs Sprudžs' career at the University of Chicago and as a national and international pioneer in law librarianship. The University of Chicago Law School joins in the celebration of Mr. Sprudžs' legacy on the occasion of his centennial. Adolfs Sprudžs had a long and highly distinguished career as the foreign and law librarian and lecturer in legal bibliography at the University of Chicago Law School from the 1967 to 1992. Where he developed one of the premier foreign and international law collections in the United States. When he joined the University of Chicago in 1965, the law school was expanding the foreign law collection for the European Economic Community countries and the international law collection. He launched the development of an excellent collection of foreign law that continues to serve scholars at the law school and the university today. Several decades of students in the law school's foreign and comparative law program worked with Mr. Sprudžs, and he remained in contact with many of our alumni. Even after his retirement, he frequently could be found working at the law school on his scholarship and serving as a resource for our law librarians and faculty. As former dean, Gerhard Kasper once wrote, "The result of Mr. Sprudžs' efforts has been the development of a significant and extremely valuable research collection that was carefully crafted to meet the needs of the Chicago faculty and students." He worked successfully to expose and explain foreign and international legal sources to scholars and students and to keep interest in these areas growing. End of quote. Adolfs Sprudžs was a leader among a generation of foreign and international law librarians who emigrated to the United States after World War II and were responsible for the collections in this country. During many decades, when few libraries could collect the legal materials of other jurisdictions and few law librarians could travel to other countries, Mr. Sprudžs actively worked to ensure that links among libraries and librarians worldwide were created and maintained. He established book exchange programs with the Baltic national libraries of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, which greatly assisted to those libraries during a time when it was almost impossible for them to acquire books from the United States. Mr. Sprudžs was a founding member of the International Association of Law Libraries in 1959 and served on the association's executive board for many years, as president twice, and was elected a life member of the association. He also received many accolades for his stewardship of collections, valued scholarship and mentorship from the law library community in the United States. In 2000, he received the American Association of Law Libraries' highest honor, the Marion Gold Gallagher Distinguished Service Award, for his lifelong accomplishments. He was selected as the inaugural member of the association's Hall of Fame. Even more important, he was one of the small group of foreign and international law librarians who ensured that law librarians throughout the world actively worked together. One of Adolfs Sprudzs' most important contributions in the service of law librarianship has been as the author of essential works and important professional literature. His publications and editorial work in legal bibliography and foreign, comparative and international law form an impressive body of work. He published over 20 books and dozens of articles, chapters and bibliographies. Few law librarians have published academic work that not only contributes to bibliographic knowledge, but is also a required tool for research for all scholars in the area. He is best known for his work in treaty research, and his UST cumulative indexing service was an indispensable tool for researchers and librarians. Adolfs Sprudzs was instrumental in creating and maintaining links among the United States librarians who were foreign and international law experts. He not only modeled excellence in curating foreign law collections and creating scholarly works to support them, but he also was a mentor to generations of law librarians as they embarked on careers building and fostering foreign, comparative and international law collections. We are especially indebted to Mr. Sprudžs for the mentorship of his successor at our law school, our esteemed foreign and international law librarian and lecturer in law, Lionette Louise Jacques. Many generations of scholars have benefited from the foreign and international law collections that Mr. Sprudžs developed at the University of Chicago. His legacy continues at our The Angelo Law Library today as our librarians guide and support scholarly work in foreign, comparative and international law. On behalf of our law school, thank you for honoring Mr. Adolfs Sprudžs' career and inviting us to celebrate it with you. Sincerely, Thomas J. Miles.
I am giving the floor to the head of the Library of Riga Graduate School of Law, Ligita Gjortlere. Good evening, dear guests. I'm honored to reveal today one facet of Adolfs Sprudžs' versatile activity, his work in promoting the development of law libraries. As we just heard from the speech by the University of Chicago, what he has achieved is unbelievable, and nowadays everyone Latvian librarian would love to be at the same level as Adolfs Sprudžs was in the United States of America. What is my connection with Mr. Sprudžs? At the time when the Soros Foundation in Latvia assigned me to create the first library of law in the region, it was decided that it was necessary to turn to the most significant employees of law libraries in the world. And among them, Adolfs Sprudžs from the University of Chicago School of Law was chosen as the first expert. This library was planned as an addition to Riga Graduate School of Law, where the study language would be English and the study programs in international and European law. So stock picking of law literature issued abroad became the #1 priority. At that time, where and how to buy books when buying from abroad was complicated because of customs and other reasons, where to gain experience and how, which literature should be chosen from the School of Law, how to create stock-picking politics for this field, we in Latvia had no experience until then. These were the problems that Adolfs Sprudžs helped us to solve. As one of his investments, of course, we must mention his most valuable endowment in 1998 to the newly founded University College. And it helped us to understand the law librarian profession. It is difficult to translate this term in Latvian, as law librarian is not legal librarian, it is a librarian in a law library. I will continue to use the term law librarian. Back then, we were gifted with the full set of magazines, International Journal of Legal Information, of which Adolfs Sprudžs was one of the editors. It turned out to be a valuable addition by offering a glimpse of what the term law librarian really means, what the inherent duties and functions are, and what relevant issues are currently being solved in the world. Only later, when working with already founded university college lecturers from all over the world, did we understand the value of this endowment received from Adolfs Sprudžs. His investment in developing various foreign law literature bibliographies, as well as in the creation of a uniform international legal citation system, was of international significance. Because at the University of Chicago, he had collected a huge amount of information. That nowadays is still used to become familiar with the sources of legal literature and decipher the abbreviations in legal literature. It is very interesting indeed. Just before coming here, I checked this index of legal abbreviations that were translated from Italian, from Spanish. These books are not even printed as books. They were printed documents bound in beautiful covers. And every book was supplemented by handwritten and marked reviews and comments by Adolfs Sprudžs in legal press in the United States of America and in other countries. Getting to know these and other editions we received from Adolfs Sprudžs, we understood that we were at the beginning of a great journey in Eastern Europe, creating such a law library. Our plans were ambitious. We wanted to look like and work just like law libraries of university colleges in Western Europe and Northern America, and I must say that a piece of advice by Adolfs Sprudžs came in handy. Thanks to his initiative in 1998, I participated for the very first time in the already mentioned International Association of Law Libraries annual conference in Rome, where I met almost 100 law librarians from all over the world for the very first time in my life. I must say that Adolfs, as he is called until this very day by my colleagues from the association, whom I have had the honor to work with, helped me a lot to fit in this, let's say, family. Because this association has never been like IFLA, with thousands of librarians. Our association has always consisted of about 100 to 150 members. So everyone more or less knows each other, and back then Adolfs introduced me to this association in a fatherly manner. Since the conference in Rome, I have participated in such annual conferences almost 20 times, and I have been on the board for 6 years, as Adolfs Sprudžs used to be. It is difficult to imagine what it would be like now, both for me and for the development of Riga Graduate School of Law, without our participation in this association, as it really provided us with the opportunity to understand the development trends of law libraries and, of course, gain contacts from librarians all over the world. Adolfs was one of the association founders in 1959, and from that day until the last day of his life, he was involved in the association's activities. I have heard so many recollections of his investment in the development of the association from his associates and further, and previous presidents of the association. From the above-mentioned Igor Kavas, Holger Knudsen, Jules Winterton, here are a lot of colleagues who I asked to tell more, but we decided that it would be the best if they talked amongst themselves and shared their memories. As mentioned already, Adolfs Sprudžs was the association's member of the board from 1974 and served as the president of the association from 1986 to 1992. These years don't indicate his investment in the development of the association and law libraries at all. His investment is far greater. And the aims that were set at that moment of founding the association continue to be relevant to this day. And we all still honor him nowadays as well. It is fantastic to feel his presence almost at every conference, because the Baltic states, their history to the members of the association always reminds of us. There are only a few of us: Adolfs Sprudzs, Igor Kavas, who is also an exiled Latvian, and we are informally and in a good way called the Baltic Mafia. This alone indicates the investment that both Igor Kavas and Adolfs Sprudžs have provided to develop the law libraries. As Andris Vilks already mentioned, he wholeheartedly took care of and supported the efforts of the Baltic states and Eastern European countries to create law libraries and to support librarians in their professional development by introducing them to their profession. And I have the honor today to thank him for this support and the knowledge provided that have given Latvia the chance to found such a law library. Thank you, and gratitude to the family and every guest for this gem in law science that is so beautifully presented here. Thank you. Now I welcome to the microphone Viesturs Zanders, the National Library of Latvia lead researcher, professor of the University of Latvia, to read the lecture Adolfs Sprudžs and the Political Monument, Res Baltica Collection.
Godājamais valsts prezidenta padomniekungs, ministra kungs, Nacionālās bibliotēkas direktora kungs, Uģis Sprūdžs, cienījamie Sprūdžu dzimtai piederīgie, Adolfam Sprūdžam pazīstamie, kolēģi un visi, kas viņu šodien godina, viņa apaļajā gadskārtā šeit, Rīgā un citur pasaulē. Latvijas Nacionālās bibliotēkas krājumā ir virkne latviešu trimdas zinātnieku un kultūras darbinieku personāla fondi, kas sniedz bagātīgu materiālu ne tikai viņu profesionālās.
The collection of the National Library of Latvia contains a range of personal papers of exiled Latvian scientists and cultural employees, providing abundant material not only for the research into their professional and political activities, but also helping very vividly to track the birth of individual books, from the original concept to the public response to these editions in the exiled community and even more broadly. This applies to the full extent to the set of documents stored in the personal papers of the library science and international law specialist Adolfs Sprudzs in the collection of rare books and manuscripts of the National Library of Latvia. I would also like to present it briefly today to all those interested in the personality of Sprudžs and his varied achievements. Specifically, I am talking about the collected articles Res Baltica, which were published in 1968. It is the edition included in the well-known bibliography of Latvian publications published outside Latvia by Benjamins Jēgers, but not considered to be a typical publication of Latvian exiles, as it was not prepared in one of the publishing houses of exiled books, but was published by internationally known Dutch publishing house. Rarities of the National Library contain a copy of this book with a dedication by Sprudžs. I quote, "To the National Library of Latvia, with warmest regards, Adolfs Sprudžs, at the IFLA Congress in Stockholm on 21st August 1919. End of quote. This was the General Conference of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, one of the first to bring together library specialists from Latvia, which had regained its independence de jure, and several home countries of Latvians in the West. According to his initial intention, the collected articles were intended to be devoted to the prominent Latvian diplomat, the Ambassador Extraordinary of Latvia to the United States from the 1930s till 1948, Alfreds Bielmanis. Here we need a small digression. The tradition of anniversary or commemorative editions devoted to an individual personality in Latvian book publishing is relatively recent. They came out in the 1930s in independent Latvia, for example, devoted to the literary historian Theodors Zeiferts, diplomat Siegfrieds Anna Meirovits, historian Arvets Švābe. Also, after World War II, Latvian exiles prepared collected articles dedicated to the theologian Kārlis Kundziņš, the linguist Jānis Enzelīns, prepared by the Chicago group of philologists of Baltic languages, the philosopher Theodors Celms, and also Jūlijs Feldmanis, the successor of Bielmanis in the office of the diplomatic representative of Latvia to the United States from 1948 till 1953. However, in the case of Res Baltica, it is possible to talk about publication that goes beyond the status of traditional Festschrift, primarily addressed to the diaspora society, as it is a cross-sectoral edition dominated by representatives of the academic environment and policymakers of other nationalities. The materials in the manuscript record group by Adolfs Sprudžs give a broad insight into the background of the creation of the collection. It started in the summer of 1964, when the Sprudžs family still lived in Champaign, Illinois, and he was the curator of the Foreign Law Library of the Department of Law of the University of Illinois. Through correspondence, researchers living in different countries were invited to be authors of the collection that would bring together original studies on the diplomatic history of the Baltic states and topical international relations matters. Sprudžs emphasized that it was a private initiative and the creation of the edition did not expect any participation of Latvian embassies, exile organizations or foundations. That is, the possibility of influencing the content of the edition in exchange for financial support. As it turned out later, ensuring freedom of research poses mainly financial problems for the initiators of the edition, but this is the price of the research autonomy. Among the researchers who have been addressed by Sprudžs were Dietrich André Löber, the Baltic German lawyer and political scientist sympathizing with Baltic people. That time research associate at the Max Planck Institute in Hamburg, who provided publishing opportunities for the Latvian legal scholars living in exile. Most of them earned daily bread in other sectors, so their path to the new publications devoted to the law was long. Löbers expressed his opinion on the offer by Sprudžs. I quote, "Your idea of issuing a collection of memorial articles devoted to Ambassador Bīlmanis is full of amazing idealism and deserves gratitude. The task will not be easy, but it can be done." End of quote. Löbers also mentioned in his letter several difficulties that could have been encountered by those creating the edition. These were both the need to justify the need to issue a such collection, as more than 10 years have already passed since the death of Bīlmanis in 1948, and the difficulties of finding suitable associates. According to Löbers, the older generation of Latvian exile lawyers, at least part of them, had been exhausted in the field of publishing, while the young showed a lack of interest and competence in the matters of law in the Baltic states. To be able to get a response among researchers of other nationalities who did not know Bīlmanis personally or professionally, Löbers even urged to consider the possibility of linking the publication of the book to a historical event, for instance, 25 years of the occupation of the Baltic states in 1965. It is obvious that in the hope of international composition of authors of the collection, English was chosen as the language of the edition. In October 1964, Sprudžs informed the ambassador's widow, Halina Bīlmane, of the intended edition and his intention to work to compile the bibliography of Bīlmanis. Also, that the ambassador's biography would be written by his fellow student, Juris Grīnbergs, a lawyer living in Edinburgh. Sprudžs also agreed with Grīnbergs that the biography of Bīlmanis would be, I quote, "no nonsense, relatively short, without the unnecessary commendations usual for Latvians. The bibliography of the ambassador's work will be much more impressive than any commendations." End of quote. However, there is no text by Grīnbergs in the Res Baltica collection. It was replaced by the essay by Sprudžs, Dr. Alfreds Bīlmanis and his fight for the freedom of the Baltic states. Halina Bīlmane had virtually no objection to the range of authors selected by Sprudžs, except for Bruno Kalniņš, a social democratic politician who was perceived in completely opposite ways by the exiled and the Latvian society. Bīlmane was reticent about the potential involvement of Kalniņš in the collected articles. I quote, "I cannot keep you from involving him in this work, but I cannot compliment you for that either." End of quote. Sprudžs reminded the ambassador's widow that during their personal meeting in Washington, she did not oppose inviting Kalniņš as an associate in the collection. Sprudžs himself appreciated the involvement of Kalniņš in the collection because Kalniņš was, I quote, "a European caliber politician with ties and a name that opens many doors, usually closed to other exile politicians." Moreover, and this is particularly important in this case, he is also an internationally known scientist, a specialist in the matters of the Soviet Union. There are very few such persons among Latvians. End of quote. Actually, it turned out to be a storm in a teacup, because we have never received the article of the Soviet propaganda system in Latvia promised by Kalniņš. In fact, the concerns expressed by Löbers about the difficulty of finding the composition of authors meeting requirements of the articles have been fulfilled. In a letter to the historian and publicist Uldis Jānis, Sprudžs acknowledged, I quote, "It is very clear to me now that it is much easier to do something individual than to try to construct a scientifically acceptable collection with the involvement of many associates. If I was not convinced that Bielmanis had more than earned such a commemoration with his active work and position, and that at the same time, for a number of reasons, the so-called exiled community would not imagine paying homage to him, I do not know how my fixed idea to organize such a collection would materialize. The experience so far in different directions was to face different degrees of skepticism, a typical approach, etc. That is so typical of exile. I still did not think to give up the struggle." End of quote. Today, we will not name others who committed to preparing articles for the Res Baltica collection, but failed to fulfill their promises under the pretext of various objective and subjective difficulties. Finally, texts from 10 authors have been published in the collection. 4 of them are Latvian scientists. One of the largest is the study by Uldis Ģermenis on the development of Latvia's independence idea in 1970, where an efficient and true translation into English was provided by the young historian Paulis Lazda. However, the first publication of this text was in several issues of the journal Jaunā gaita. Soviet federalism in criminal law was covered by Professor Zigorts Laimonis Zīle of the University of Wisconsin, while Ilmārs Beķeris, future diplomat, that time head of the International Division of Sweden's Ministry of Education and Culture, contemplated on the legal consequences of the Soviet nationalization law in Sweden. Res Baltica contains 2 articles by Lebers, who was already a professor at Kiel University at that time. One of them is dedicated to the administration of literature and art in the context of the legislation of occupied Latvia, while the other analyzes the property rights of Latvian nationals in German judicial conflicts. In 2 longer articles, George Ginsburg's, a professor at the University of Iowa, looks at aspects of nationality and international treaties in the Baltic states annexed by the Soviet Union. The commemorative sketch by Louis Weasley Henderson, one of the leading employees of the U.S. Department of State, is an introduction to the Res Baltica collection. He was a diplomat who was a part of the American Red Cross in Latvia in 1919 till 1920. During his career, he was introduced to Bielmanis in Riga in the 1920s and met him in Moscow in the 1930s and in Washington in the 1940s. It is important to mention that Henderson was one of the co-authors of the Declaration of Non-Recognition of the Incorporation of the Baltic States in 1940. The title page of Res Baltica mentions the name of Armin Sprūdžs, a law librarian of the Library of Congress, right next to Sprūdžs. At the end of 1966, Sprūdžs wrote in a letter to Sprūdžs, "The collection of Bielmanis is of vital interest to me, as Bielmanis was one of the few who openly fought for Latvia and who, during his life, did much more to popularize Latvia than those who are still kept being praised and who have deserved it less. This is why I cannot understand the position of some of the leading Latvians against Bielmanis without even motivating it." End of quote. In the course of creating the collection, Sprūdžs commented on the manuscripts of the other authors, but he never finished his 2 articles, as he stated self-critically in one of his letters, I quote, "I don't want to disgrace myself because the other articles are of such high quality." End of quote. When we study the materials showing the course of the creation of the collection, it is difficult to treat the involvement of Sprūdžs in the creation of Res Baltica as equivalent to that of Sprūdžs. Sprūdžs contributed a lot of effort not only to correspondence with the authors of Res Baltica, translation and editing of manuscripts, but also to conversations with the publishers of the collection. There was also no shortage of obstacles and disappointments here. For instance, Ocean Publications in New York refused to issue the collection in the summer of 1967. In the spring of 1968, Sprūdžs finally managed to conclude an agreement on the issue of the collected articles with the publishing house established by Albertus Willem Sithoff in Leiden in the mid-19th century, which, among other things, also issued the materials of the International Court of Justice in The Hague at the time. In August 1968, in a letter to Sprūdžs, Ģermenis congratulated him on the publication of his book. I quote, "I hope you are pleased to know that the difficult activity has been brought to an end. One could only wish that we'd had more such people than different windbags and toasters." End of quote. When urged by Jānis to think about the peer review of the collection in the exile press, and having received the address of the director of the Fundamental Library of the Latvian Academy of Science sent by him, Sprudžs responded that he did not specifically care about getting feedback in the Latvian press, just mentioned that, I quote, "Maybe gentlemen in Washington, meaning the Latvian diplomatic missions to the United States, are not satisfied with the book, but, as it seems, they probably cannot make up their minds what to do now." End of quote. Sprudžs was not in a hurry to send the book to Riga. I quote, "I don't know if at this time I should force my love, because the book isn't something flattering for the regime. Also, I have a brother there, and do I have to draw attention to myself in this way? I am not sure, especially after this summer's events in Europe." End of quote. Indeed, there was not much feedback on Res Baltica in the exile Latvian press, and it appeared quite some time after the collection had been published. It is significant and at the same time natural that some of the reviewers were the ones whom Sprudžs expected to participate in the collection at some point. Among them the historian Edgars Andersons and the political scientist Jānis. The political writer Adolfs Sprudžs believed that the bibliography of Bīlmenis complied by Sprudžs, which summarized more than 200 publications printed in different languages over more than 30 years, was a significant benefit of Res Baltica. Sprudžs wrote, "It had to be compiled not only for the sake of order, but also as an index of sources that is still sought and is helpful. Many of the articles by Bīlmenis are still topical today." He also pointed out quite accurately and vividly that the collection makers had not expected to, quote, "find big audience of the readers for this edition. They just wanted to help give the so needed slice of bread into the hands of the new Latvian academic intelligence. Luckily, we have generated thousands of them during the exile. It is facts and data on Latvia's history as well as finding in current problems." End of quote. As Sprudžs noted, when the feedback was created, Res Baltica had already been mentioned in 3 international bibliographic indexes, including in Harvard in the United States and Karlsruhe in Germany. This is worth mentioning to demonstrate that the cited and miscited databases today that are often used as the only measure of the significance of some research are nothing new, and their importance had also been fully realized by our predecessors 50 years ago and earlier. Having identified the indexing of Res Baltica in significant editions of Western scientific periodicals, Peniķis concluded that without it, any edition, I quote, "simply sinks in the huge flood of scientific and popular literature." End of quote. Therefore, according to him, Res Baltica, I quote, "is not facing anonymity like many of our other well-intentioned editions in English." End quote. The collection had just been published when a piece of news flashed in the press that Baltic Appeal to the United Nations would use the $1,000 donated by industrialist Roberts Hirsch to transfer Res Baltica to the ambassadors of various countries to the United Nations. I do not have sufficiently reliable information on whether it has succeeded and whether Res Baltica was available at the first conference on Baltic Studies at the University of Maryland in November 1968. In July 1970, Jānis visited the family of Sprūdžs in Chicago, and in a book published a year later, Tā lieta pati nekritīs, Amerikas piezīmes, described it as a citadel of Latvianness. Having noticed an album with reviews about Res Baltica in the house of Sprūdžs, Jānis said, "You can feel pleased, Adolf," I added, putting the review album back on the shelf. "But I know that the victory won has cost him a lot and in a different ways. All that scars made by indifference, lack of understanding, small-mindedness and malevolence of people have not healed yet." Sprudžs said, "If I had known what it would require, I would never have started." Jānis replied, "It's good that sometimes we don't know. This is the only way to do something valuable." In 2000, when the American Association of Law Libraries honored Sprudžs, poet and cultural historian Jānis Krēsliņš Sr., when describing it, also mentions Res Baltica as a very important and first-class published collected articles that, I quote, "show and document the merits of Ambassador Bīlmenis, achieving that United States and thus some other countries did not recognize the inclusion of Latvia and the Baltic states in the Soviet Union." End quote. Krēsliņš stated with some bitterness that the role of Ambassador Bielmanis is not mentioned in this respect today in Latvia when discussing the restoration of independence. Whatever the self-sufficiency of former collaborators who have been transformed by this time court historians, the words of Krēsliņš still sound relevant today in 2022. I quote, "American scientists have praised Adolfs Sprudžs. It is time for Latvians, both in exile and in Latvia, to extol his merits as a quiet fighter in the forum of international law for the restoration of independence of Latvia and the Baltic states and recognition of the fact of occupation." End of quote.
Paldies par uzmanību.
Franča Trasūna muzeja Kolnasāta novadnieki. Unfortunately, people from Sakstagals, Rēzekne Municipality, who live in the same district as the Sprūdžs family, Museum of Francis Trasūns and folklore group Kolnasāta were not able to come. They have sent their greeting letter and their musical greeting. Good afternoon. Sakstagals in Rēzekne County is proud to be the birthplace of many famous people. One of them is Adolfs Sprudžs, who was born 100 years ago and is internationally renowned as a librarian scientist, librarian of international law, and in 2002 he was awarded the Latvian Order of the Three Stars. Adolfs Sprudžs studied at the University of Latvia, but because of the occupation of the country and World War II, he was forced to emigrate to Germany. Then, after that, to the United Kingdom and later to Belgium, where he started a family with Jānis Strode. And finally, he settled in Chicago, where he spent the rest of his life. While living abroad, Adolfs Sprudžs did not forget his roots, his native land. Latvian traditions and the sense of belonging to the Latvian nation were inherited by his children. Professionally, he achieved a lot. He worked at the University of Chicago as a lecturer, was the leader of the International Association of Law Libraries, wrote several books on law, but deep down he remained the same Latvian from the vast countryside of Latgale. From the place where 58 years before he came into this world, the Latgalian revivalist Francis Trasūns was born. Materials from the Francis Trasūns Museum Kolnasāta collection are also used in the creation of the exhibition. Even though it is not possible to attend the event in person, COVID-19 is still with us. I'm grateful for the cooperation between the National Library of Latvia and the Francis Trasūns Museum Kolnasāta. I send you all warm greetings and look forward to future cooperation. Best regards, Inta Deksne.
Yes, mozi pie mārgum nagojam. Mēs ar puišim savas soļas darājām.
Zīmā, ka nūkova cilku, mēs jim atdeve meizaļnīku. Mēs iztrinam jū, lai būtu mēksts, pībozam īšā zierņu, pīpiltam, pakoram pie cepļa izkaļtām, a tot pa uztabu tai bungom, ka brakšā vien.
A vēl mēs Reigu gribējām redzēt.
A ko nozīmē Reigu redzēt?
A Reigu redzēt, tie gandrīz kā īsvietēšana, zīma, kad sasauc spislīdes, mēli pīlīkam, ir Reigu īraugam.
Oi, nu puiši, kā jau puiši, par to jūs vajag aucinoti pie meitam vest, lai mēs varētu mīroģēt eistu vītu.
Nu, mēs visur tādas kortīgas esam bijušas, jāņījušas, izšīvušas.
A par to, ka pūrs bija jopīlūka.
A nevar būt.
A vot bija gon.
Pagudami dzīvīt meites, pagudami runojīti, ar gudeņu nosojīti, savu zeļu vaļņu ceņu, ar gudeņu nosojīti, savu zeļu vaļņu ceņu. Vaļņuks munu rožu veitu, nanu kreiti boleņusi, nu kreitautu krieteņai, zamoroja kojeņomi, nu kreitautu krieteņai, zamoroja kojeņom. Kojeņis munes kojeņis, moksoj tautu kumieleņu, cikom tautis zirgu jūdza, asovusi boleņusi, cikom tautis zirgu jūdza, asovusi boleņus. Tautis tauteņom pīdēva, sova gudra padumeņa, asnoīšu boleņusi, man pīdusi boleleņi, asnoīšu boleņusi, man pīdusi boleleņi.
Voi tad tu ļuca ar puišiem mežģinīka bumbu nadauzēji?
Nu, dauzēju.
A tu, Zosia, ar puišiem pasīna pločina zadauzēji?
Nu, vēja.
Nu, redz, ka gribat izaliktīs labākas nekā bija.
Ak, mēs jau i puiši, i meitas Sakstagolā esam gan strūdojuši, gan nadarbus darījuši, dzīdojuši, doncojuši, bet visam pa vidu ir bijusi liela ļuvesteiba.
Kā ir meitam pret puišiem?
Tā ir puišiem pret meitam.
Ai, leli meži, zaļi uzuleņi, tīguļoja teiksmoseņi, sineņukos dāmas, tīguļoja teiksmoseņi, sineņukos dāmas.
Ai, nosin zelta
Nu tad noslēgumā laiks pateicībām.
We would like to thank the Director of National Library of Latvia, Andris Vilks, for his proposal to create an exhibition to commemorate the centennial anniversary of Adolfs Sprudžs, and the National Library of Latvia administration for their support. I thank colleagues for their involvement in the preparation and creation of the exhibition. Special thanks to artists Tatjana Raičiņeca and Aneta Krūmiņa for the development of the exhibition design. Thanks to Ainārs Egle, Jevgenijs Isojevs for setting up the exhibition. Thanks to Anna Muhka and August Zilberts for their advice in ensuring publicity of the exhibition and the event. Sabine Ensonska for her support and involvement in organizing the event. To the video content creator Kristians Luhers, to audio and video technicians Andis Vinogradovs and Jānis Lange, who ensured the possibility to connect to the event online. Thanks to the photographer Girts Barkāns. Thanks to the head of the Letonika and Baltics Center, Kristīna Zaļuma, and colleagues from the Rare Book and Manuscript Reading Room, and special thanks to the researcher of National Library of Latvia, Viesturs Zanders. Thanks to colleagues Marika Karlsone and Lita Paegle from the Digital Development Department. Special thanks to Uģis Sprūdžs and his family for the involvement in the creation of the exhibition and in organizing the event. Thanks to the head of the Museum of Francis Trasuns, Inta Deksne, and colleagues for loaning museum materials for the exhibition.
Paldies arī folkloras kopai Kolnasāta. Vislielākais paldies ir
Thank you to the exhibition content creator and concept authors and implementers. Inga Vovčenko, Ilze Gensberga, Zane Krūmiņa, Ludmila Matspāne, Anda Salduvere, Elita Vīksna, and Irēne Moreino. I am also thanking everyone who supported us and was involved in the creation of the exhibition and organizing the event. You are welcome to view the exhibition. In 10 to 15 minutes, you are all invited to the social gathering at the Library Ridge, where we have a free microphone and anyone will have an opportunity to share their memories while remembering Adolfs Sprudžs and his family. Thanks to all of you, those who are here and those who connected to the event online. The exhibition can be viewed until January 21st, 2023. You are all invited.